Talking Gallery is an example for all Europe.
Buona tarda, good afternoon. Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for being here in the second session of Talking Galleries. My name is Carlos Urroz, and I'm director of ARCOmadrid, the art fair happening in Madrid since 30 years. When I was approached by the organizers of Talking Galleries to participate, I thought, oh, what a wonderful idea, what a wonderful project that should certainly be supported by ARCO. Then I thought ARCO is an art fair which was founded by a gallerist, by Juana de Izpuru, one of our great gallerists, who's not here today, but I'm sure she would have a say about all these things we're discussing tonight, who convinced the Madrid institutions to create an art fair in Madrid, in an emerging country in the 80s. In ARCOS, in its 30 years, there has been a lot of talking among galleries, gossiping sometimes exchanging ideas, sometimes even therapy about whether they have sold and they have not sold. But ARCOmadrid is not only about talking between galleries, but about something else, which is making the galleries sell. And in these 30 years, sometimes ARCO has managed to make the galleries sell, sometimes even in an euphoria, like in the late 80s or in the early 2000s, sometimes not so well, and sometimes we're struggling to get the collectors to the fair, to import people. So then I understood the title of this panel, which is Dealing with the Economical Crisis. So that's what we're going to discuss tonight. I'm going to first introduce the other panelists. First, we have Georgina Adams from the art newspaper, journalist from the art newspaper and Financial Times. She's an expert in the art market. She's been more than 25 years writing about art, and since 2008, she's editor-at-large at the art newspaper. She's also a specialist in the art market and in emerging markets, and she will do a presentation about the whole situation of the art market. Sitting by my side, I have Soledad Lorenzo, she's celebrating her 25th anniversary of the gallery. She opened the gallery 25 years ago, and she has been through two of the crises. In the 70s, she didn't have her own gallery, but she went through the crisis in the 90s with a gallery, so I think she has an overview about what means running a gallery in a difficult economical moment. And third, we have Professor Tornabell, who's former dean of ESADE and expert in banking and finance. Also an art lover, that's also why he's connected to the art world. So he will give us an overview of the whole economical situation right now, how the investment market is working, and will give us a more probably distant view of our everyday problems. So if you want, we can start briefly with Mr. Tornabell's presentation on dealing with the economical crisis.
May I?
Please do.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me say something. When I teach, when I give conferences, someone asked me, Robert, how you did to survive the horrible crash, economic crash of 1929. I can assure you that I was born in Barcelona later on. But I must say that I studied trade cycles in the States, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, at Madrid and Barcelona. And in the past 45 years, I had been teacher and 10 years dean at ESADE Business School. Well, to start with, let me say that the worst is behind us, far away. It happened 3 years ago, the 15th of September, the year 2008. It was the default of the investment bank Lehman Brothers. My feelings, and I could say the feelings of the central banks, central institutions, was like looking at, the worst to come. But thanks to international monetary funds, thanks to the Federal Reserve System and all the central banks of Europe, Japan, thanks to the world coordinations, we were lucky and we could recover. But let me say that it has been a very bizarre or strange recession. The BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and China were lucky, hard workers, and they didn't suffer any recession. And nowadays we say, we have seen a miracle, because Brazil is an economical miracle in Latin America. Everybody talks about China. Russia is in a different situation, and India is becoming a world power. But what happens to the developed world? Well, we are behind. We cannot grow at the same velocity. Of course, Germany was the first country, developed country, to recover May 2011. France, Holland, Sweden, all Central Europe. But we don't know for sure. But in spite that I don't have a crystal ball, I would say, are we in front of a double dip? Or are we in front of a slowing recovery that will take many years to create new jobs in the US, new jobs, of course, in Spain? We have 5 million jobless people. The drawing comes from The Economist. The British were wise people, lucky people, because they said, we prefer the pound. But the Swedish said the same. And of course, the Danish. And the Canadians, of course, and Australians, everybody. Finland is saying, oh, what a pity, because we are not prepared to pay the debt of Greece, Portugal, and the list, Ireland, could be extended. Is the Eurozone in that situation? I don't think so. But I must recognize that we are in a very, very delicate situation. We don't know if we will issue Eurobonds Eurobonds means that the Germans will pay more taxes. And they say, we don't accept this. Eurobond means that the Dutch will pay more taxes. And they say, in accordance with our parliament, we don't accept that. If we don't have Eurobonds, we should go to the European Fund and the International Monetary Fund to pay the debt of Greece. Because in a few weeks, Greece could be a country, the first country of the Eurozone in default. The second one, I don't know, but the first one for sure could be Greece. In the last meeting, last summit, the Eurogroup decided, let's take more time. In October, we will decide if we take the debt of Greece with a haircut, a discount, and if our taxpayers will pay something in order to help Greece. But going to your business, four years ago, before the crisis, Standard & Poor's published a research showing that after 25 years, the investments more profitable were shares, public debt, real estate, and the fourth of the five, art, paintings, art in general. Nowadays, the ranking is the opposite. The most profitable investment today, with a better future, is art. The second one is gold for the time being, but I guess is on the ceiling, is at the top. The third one is not shares, is not real estate, is not public debt. I am not sure. I don't know. For you, I believe it's a good news. It's good news that, excuse me, the interest rates are going down. I repeat, the interest rates that I take are how much is paying Germany to sell bonds, 10 years bonds of Germany. How much pay Sweden? How much pay the UK, and so on. If interest rates, like in the States, are 1.70% or maximum 2%, that is good news for your sector, for the art business. Because where can the wealthy people invest money? Where? In shares? In debt that doesn't pay enough? Gold is in the ceiling? Silver? Art for the time being? And I guess for medium or long-term future, art is the best investment because it gains value. The art doesn't pay dividends like the gold. The art doesn't pay coupons and so on, but the most important is that it gains capital value. It maintains its value. Before starting, I was talking with the president of the European Galleries Association, and he gave me a lesson. Yeah. He told me there are two investments in art. The first investment is the first time when one buy a painting. The second investment is when recognize the value, when he get smart, with get knowledge, and maintain this investment thanks to the value that he see is gained along the time. I am a little bit afraid because I know that at my age, we cannot be so categorical. I should say, could be, we don't know, might be, but I do believe that after losing 20% of value, all the stock exchange in Europe, not in Brazil, after losing the public debt billion of dollars, except the bonds, except the debt of Sweden or the Austria. After losing money, all the real estate developers in the States, Ireland, some of them in UK, of course in Spain, because we have suffered the real estate bubble. I repeat, I do believe in the art as investment. But I am not an expert, and every gallery, every person with expertise can pick up, can select the best pieces for investment. But in general, in accordance with the ranking of Standard & Poor's, is the best, is the opposite before this great recession.
Thank you so much. I think we should invite Professor Tornabell to do this talk in front of other collectors. That will encourage them to invest in art. And they probably trust more Professor Tornabell as ESADE professor than to all of us as colleagues and gallerists. But thank you so much. Now will be Georgina Adams, who will give us an introduction to the changes, recent changes in the art market. Bueno, lo vemos desde aquí, ¿no? Si quieres.
Okay, hello. Some of the things that I'm going to talk about today you've already touched on in the earlier session, but I'm going to put perhaps a bit of flesh on the bones of what you discussed, give you some figures, and tell you how I see the current situation of the art market. In a sense, I'm going to open up the discussion for later on, rather than give you a precise view, just give you some ideas of the way I think it's heading at the moment. So just have a look at some figures. Here is the actual overall size of the art market, and this figure is made up of two figures, one which we know, which is the auction market, and we want to talk about the auction market and the publicity that the auction houses manage to garner, which is a problem for galleries. The other half, which is slightly larger, is through dealers. Now, the auction figure, we know, it's precise, it's recorded. The dealer figure is completely vague. It's collated by Claire McAndrew, who produces a regular report for TEFAF. And she has talked to some of these dealers. Apparently, art dealers, there's more than 400,000 in the world, but actually only the top 2 to 5% actually account. They account for more than half of the sales. And as we have seen, a good proportion of that goes through art fairs. These figures, as I say, come from Claire McAndrew. Here's the good news. We've got lots of good news as well as the bad news. And the good news is the evolution of the market. Now, these figures are auction figures because we do not have dealer figures going back to 1976, which is when this index was started. It's on a basket of art, so it includes contemporary art, but also old masters, not decorative arts, just painting, sculpture, prints. And you'll see the great crisis that we had after there was a huge boom between 1987 and 1990. It ends very suddenly, as you can see here, and drops. It drops because there was the invasion of Kuwait and because the real estate market collapsed. Then we bump along, we have our heights, we also have drops. And then we have this extraordinary boom that started in about 2004 to 2006 and ends, as Professor Tornabell says, in September 2008. But I will remind you that the day that Lehman Brothers went down was also the day that Damien Hirst's sale at Sotheby's made a colossal amount of money. So let's not totally despair here. Now we see the drop, but I'd also like you to notice this, that the art market has rebounded extremely strongly from the crisis. And I'd also like you to notice it's a good deal higher than it was even at its peak in 1990. Of course, the amount of money, the value of money is not quite the same. So the other thing that's extremely important and interesting about the art market, I want you to concentrate, to focus on this little figure here. We're talking about the global share of the art market in 2006, not so long ago. And here we have our beefy champion, the US, pretty strong Britain, France at 6%. France in the 1950s was the strongest art market in the world, long ago, unfortunately for France. And here we have China, which is a little adolescent, probably even a babe in arms. And if we look at the same figures, last year, look at these figures. US has shrunk, UK has shrunk, China has gone to 23%. According to the data that you look at, China is possibly the biggest art market in the world today, certainly the second biggest, based on auction data. Now, does that mean that China is sweeping across the world? No. It's a huge population, a growing economy, and China, those figures for China, which include Hong Kong and Taiwan, those figures for China, a good part of it is made up of Chinese people buying Chinese art from Chinese auction houses in China, for the moment. But I was talking recently to François Curiel of Christie's, who now lives in Hong Kong, and he says the question to ask is, will one day Beijing be the center of the art market, because of the way it's going? So this is something that we need to address when we have our discussion. I mean, what is going to happen with China? For the moment, it's a largely internal market. The other thing I think it is important to say is that Chinese figures are not 100% reliable. There is over-reporting of the Chinese economy in general and of art figures as well. But when one of our earlier speakers talked about the biggest auction houses, they said the three biggest. I imagine that they were thinking of Sotheby's, Christie's, and possibly Phillips de Pury, possibly Bonhams. The fact is that in the top 20 auction houses in the world today, 11 are Chinese. And remember that Chinese auction houses didn't exist a decade ago, whereas Sotheby's and Christie's have existed since the 18th century. So all of this is a very important thing to think about when you talk about the future of art galleries. So what I see is the main trend that I've been looking at is the polarization. What a number of the speakers have called about is the branded galleries, I would say the mega galleries. Polarization is not just happening in the art market. Polarization is happening everywhere. The rich are still rich, and the poor, the gap between the rich and the poor is widening in the art market and elsewhere. It means that there are mega dealers, there are mega auction houses, Sotheby's, Christie's, and now the Chinese, particularly Polly and Guardian, which are the two biggest. We're also, art fairs used to be something very personal and small. Each art fair was either run by a person or run by a town, like Basel. Now we have Basel, Fries. Basel has now got 3, Art Basel Miami Beach, Hong Kong, and of course Basel. Frieze is now extended, it's adding another 2 fairs. So this polarization is happening across the market. And of course, the rich are getting... the rich lost money during the last recession, during the global financial crisis, but on the whole, if you look at the statistics, most of them have regained their wealth. So the rich people, like I've chosen François Pinault and Viktor Pinchuk of Ukraine, but I could name a number of other people. What has also happened, so you have this polarization, very strong collectors. What's happening is squeezing the middle galleries. The mega galleries, the mega galleries, they have the financial strength to compete with auction. So we're talking about Gagosian and Hauser and Wirth ones. But it's tougher for the smaller ones, particularly those in the secondary market where there's more competition. And a lot of them are actually leaving their ground. We've seen this trend in England. They're no longer going to having ground floor galleries, they're going to offices because they're doing art fairs a lot. So the art fair debate is very interesting because it's at the same time been good for galleries because it's enabled them to have a broader scope, but at the same time they've slightly shot themselves in the foot, as we say in England. They've committed a sort of suicide. And what is disappearing is a tiered market in which you had a market at every level. You had a market for rich people, for not so rich people, for the connoisseurs, and all the way down. Now there's still a good market at the lower end of young, smaller galleries that make discoveries, find young artists. But it's in the middle, and remember, the middle collectors are the ones who are probably being squeezed by taxes, by rising costs of everything. Their energy, their mortgages, everything's going up. And so this is also affecting the galleries. The other big thing which we really need to talk about, which is the threat to galleries from auction, because auction houses are also becoming dealers. Nordmans, which is a Dutch old master paintings dealer, has been bought by Sotheby's. A Haunch of Venison belongs to Christie's, and Sotheby's has now just opened an exhibition space in its New York headquarters. So this is a danger. They're also selling. Before 1980, the auction houses were not in competition with contemporary art galleries. They didn't sell contemporary art. Now they're selling contemporary art in a big way, successfully. They're also selling directly from the artists, so there again, they are cutting in onto the dealer's market. For example, the Hearst sale of September 2008. And in places like China and India, which are growing markets, the artists are going directly to auction. They're even organising fairs, in the sense of Christie's. During Frieze Week in London, Christie's is organising an art fair called Multiples. At the moment, it's just for prints. But it shows that this is a real problem for galleries. Of course, they're also threatened by government cuts. This is particularly, obviously, impacting on museum budgets. And the economic situation is impacting on endowments. American museums, which are privately funded, they have endowments, and they use the income from that to run themselves, to pay for acquisitions. And obviously, with a completely slumping stock exchange, the endowments are down. And of course, in Europe, I don't have to tell you that government cuts everywhere are impacting on acquisition budgets. So there is some good news in all of this. Firstly, the global financial crisis did not really have a major impact on galleries. Very few actually went out of business. In New York, maybe 20, 30, which is not huge. In Britain, one or two, not very many. The other thing is that the 1990 crisis, after sales stopped completely. It was dramatic for art galleries. Sales have continued after the global financial crisis, and as we saw, they've now taken off very well. And let's be fair to the auction houses. They did manage the situation well. They reduced their sales, they reduced the estimates, and they produced sales that were smaller but quite successful, and confidence is terribly important in the art market. So I think we need to at least say that they did actually help during the global financial crisis and the aftermath. The other thing that's good is that art, this is something that our professor has talked about, art is a tangible asset, shares and so on, the returns are very poor. There's a lot of interest in art as a tangible asset, and I think this is good news for gallerists. The other good news is that a lot of people now, if you're very rich, you want to have your private art space, and this has been a motor for the art market. And there we are.
I will ask the speakers to come back and start our debate. Thank you, Georgina. Thank you, Professor Tornabell. When I was doing the research for this panel, I went through the press releases of previous ARCOs since 2008 till the present ones. And besides the one in 2009, which was February 2009, that really spoke about the crisis, the other ones were always speaking about the recovery of the art market, and basically based on two facts: the figures from the auction houses and the development of new economies like China or Russia. So I think we all, of course, our press releases before the fair are very optimistic about the art market. It's about trust and about confidence, and we want the future collectors to think that it's investing in art is a very good asset, as Professor Tornabell was saying. So we try to focus in that point. But strictly speaking, talking about galleries, that's what we're doing today, I would like to ask if these figures that we see in your magazine, in the art newspaper, are really affecting the galleries. If the sales in the past 2 or 3 years are increasing, or it's not the case, at least in Europe. I would like to ask Soledad about it.
I think, well, people speak of recuperation, but at least in Spain, I think things are still very quiet. So, there is, but the only thing in my experience that is, I'm convinced, is going to happen, because, well, I have lived three crises, 70s, 90s, and now. So if we look at the number of years who separate this crisis, there is exactly 20 years. So, and we think about our lives, you know, when I don't know anything about economies, and I don't follow economy, only through the business, but I don't really believe very much in economy, because life is a fiction, but the economy is really something that...
Science fiction.
Science fiction, exactly. So, well, what is true is that we had a crisis in the 70s, then in the 90s, and now. So, big crisis. The 70s, I could not really live them. Just, I had not my own gallery in that moment, and I lived it more frivolously. But the 90s was really very, very hard, the same like now. The only thing is that when things are over, it's because they always seem much longer than what it is, the reality, because there is a moment that things are recovering, but that the society, we don't feel it, except the people that you are more inside the economy, no? So I'm convinced that perhaps in this moment we are
recovering,
better, because time has passed, but at least, I don't know in other countries, but in Spain, I think there is still, and the newspapers say Spain perhaps has an extra problem, but what I'm convinced is that somewhere we are recuperating, because it's cycles.
I agree in a way with Soledad. I think that we have a selective memory, and we have forgotten how tough was the 90s. And now that we are in this crisis, we think, oh, this is terrible, we are not going to recover. But when I started running ARCO last year, I went to the figures of previous years as we were thinking of making the fair smaller. And I started working in ARCO in 1994. And it was really a very tough moment. ARCO had been through a terrible year in 92, 93 and 94, they went to the former venue in Casa de Campo, and the figures of galleries, even in 2008 and 2009, were much higher. So I think somehow within the Spanish market, we're unaware that the crisis and the market in the 90s was much smaller. So in a sense, now there are more collectors, even though they might spend more, they might be more confident or not, but there are more collectors, there are more museums, there are more exhibition spaces. So the whole art market has grown a lot since then, even though all those drop-offs that we have had.
For me, the feeling at the gallery, and I'm convinced that perhaps it happens in all countries as well, is that the difference with the other decades, we say, is like now I feel there is the money there. The clients have the money, but they don't want to spend. It's like if the obligation is to say not to spend money now in this moment. No, it's like to be stupid or something, to go on. And there is they contain the logical collector who likes is to buy, and they come, they like it, but they don't. They buy much less. Thanks God, some of them
Maybe
act as the collectors have always acted. They have the money, they buy.
I think we should ask Professor Tornabell to give us some piece of advice about what to explain to collectors, to people who are experts in finance, who know about investments, how to convince them to invest in art, not only in art.
Can I?
Sure.
It's because I will never convince my clients about the economical side of it, because they must know it. They must love art enough, because the thing, we sell art because the collector, I'm speaking of collectors, a beginner, okay, but the collectors believe in art the same like the people that we sell. So
Yeah,
we don't have to convince them. We have to present things that they like, and they are really the first, and the new collectors.
Sure.
It's very quick. Because it's passion.
Of course.
It's not
But
the value. Then that becomes very important, because somewhere in their mind they know that is a good investment, art, because the history of art says it, that and even the people from the economy side.
Maybe not convince them, but any piece of advice that could be helpful to encourage someone who is, I don't know, some figures or some, I think
there is already too much speaking about money and art, and I think it's just the opposite, that you have to love by passion, because it is the only way that you maintain it, and you don't sell it in a sale a few years after, because the economy is insecure.
Okay. Maybe if you want to give any advice or...
Well, I would say you are in a new economy, but at the same time, I guess we are starting a new way of life, a new society, because people are afraid of spending. They prefer to save for, the
future.
Because they say the welfare state, the welfare economics is going down. I prefer to save. And in an economy, this clear formula written in the New York Times by the Nobel Prize winner Paul Krugman. Paul Krugman said, if you don't spend, if you don't invest, if you don't export, you cannot pay, the right tariffs, you don't pay the pensions, you don't pay the health for the people, and so on. And our problem is we don't spend, we don't invest, we don't export enough. and it's new. It hasn't happened. If I look behind, I see 1989 when the Berlin Wall was destroyed, and now we have a new society.
But the thing is that the other day one client was telling me, of course, Soledad people invest in art because it's secure and that. I say the difference now is the people who buy, they do it because I like it and they decide to buy it, but not as an investment. While in other times of that the economy was better, yes, many people invest on art because they believe that is one of the things that is
That's
secure and that, but not now.
That's the most
Now
desirable
people
client,
are
the
containing
most desirable
themselves to buy just
collector. I would also like to ask Georgina, she was talking about emerging markets, and I think that lots of the figures that talk about the recuperation of the art market is based in emerging market. Whether she has an idea which one of the market it's developing more quickly or it's easier to launch in, you know, whether it's China or Eastern countries or Middle East. What do you think, which of these emerging art markets are easier to approach for a European gallery?
Firstly, I think that you can't talk about the emerging markets as one block. They actually, all of them perform extremely differently. When we talk about emerging markets, if we talk about Russia, for example, Russian buyers will buy international contemporary art outside Russia on the whole. There's not a big developed market in Russia itself. The collectors moved very quickly from buying 19th century painting, which is what they knew, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and once the great fortunes were made in energy supplies, particularly. At the beginning, they would buy Aiwazowski or Kustudiov or those Russian 19th century artists, which they knew from their books because they'd learned about them. They very quickly moved on to international brand names, such as Hearst or Freud, or as we know, Abramovich. Has spent a lot of money on art, and he's got the garage now with his partner. So Russia is one case. China is a second case. I've already mentioned what's happened in China. In China, it's for the moment a domestic market, but have no doubt China is going to change everything. One of the things that I think is interesting to know about China is that we in the West tend to think that Renaissance art is the sort of the pinnacle, a Leonardo, a Raphael drawing. Very little of it's on the market, so you can't evaluate its value, actually. But the world record for a work on paper is now held by a Chinese artist, not by a Western Renaissance artist. And this is going to change tastes, inevitably. $63 million was paid for a work on paper in Beijing. So I think this is something that is going to change the world. The Middle East is very interesting. There again, it's a very different market. At the moment, there is a developing gallery situation in Dubai, which is quite good, but there's enormous restrictions, which also exist, in fact, in China. One of the parallels is censorship. And so a lot of things like anything sexual, anything political is difficult to sell, in fact, difficult to show. I mean, things that we would not consider in the least bit provocative are unsaleable in Dubai. The auctions have not been a great success there. I mean, just recently, Christie's, who held sales there, have actually downed the amount of the lower estimate. They're producing lower. Bonhams has pulled out. On the other hand, there are immense museum projects in the Gulf, and these are certainly, this should be gold, but those museum projects in Abu Dhabi have slowed down a little bit with the global financial crisis. So that's India is potentially huge, but it's not happened yet. It's going to happen, but it's not happened yet. And then, of course, there's Brazil, which is, I think, has got an enormous amount of potential. And it's linked to resources as well. Brazil has huge resources.
Thank you. I think we're changing the format. We would like this to be a more open dialogue with more questions from the public. So we will start now the open questions. I would first ask the people that make the question to introduce themselves and say whether they're galleries and where they come from or what's their role, because that would be easier for the whole audience to understand the questions. So if the microphones are ready, we can start with questions. You have one here, and then Mr. Gaspar and Mr. Gisler.
Victor Gisler, I have the May 36 gallery in Zurich. Also recovered, stayed through 2 crises. Almost 25 years I run the gallery. The question is art the new currency now for the rich people? And when they buy, do they buy it for the useless love of art or the use of the economy, of the value? And who values that? Is it the auction house? Is it the museum world? Who will it be in the future?
Maybe Mr. Tornabell or Georgina.
I guess the expert.
I think it's an excellent question. Absolutely fantastic. So the question was in 2 parts. The first part was...
The first one, do you believe that art is the new currency for the rich
Yes.
in the world?
And the second one was...
Then
who
we need a
evaluates
value
it?
system.
Yes.
Is it the auction house? Is it the museum? Who will give the value?
Well, I think that to take the second question first, I think that the museums put a value on it that's not necessarily a monetary value. They put an aesthetic. They endorse an artist. But of course, it does spill over into the monetary value of it as well. The auction houses, this is something that really needs to be discussed, is their publicity machines. Speaking as a journalist, I receive every day press releases, and the press releases say, we made this incredible price for a Jeff Koons, we made this amazing price for something. If you look closely at the results, they had one fantastic result. Maybe they only sold 50% of the sale. Unfortunately, there aren't very many journalists around who are specialists of the art market and who know to look at those results and see that actually it wasn't that super successful a sale. They made one great price, because as we all know, masterpieces will always, the exceptional will always make a great price. So I think that's answer to the first part. To the second question. As for art, I'll just finish. As for art, yes, I think that it is. I think to an extent art is used for hedging against currency fluctuations. But everyone benefits in a way.
Thank you. You know exactly that the new museums coming now into existence it's private money. The
Yes.
Chinese, Qatar, it's private money. So how
It's state money. Well,
you know, it's a
That's
different
n-
thing. It
in the
doesn't have
Middle East,
our
it's the
culture.
same
It's
thing.
completely
Yes,
bought
in the Middle
because
East,
of different
yes.
reasons.
yes.
So isn't there a huge change going on? What
Absolutely.
value means? I mean, these people they spending billions with the so-called mega sellers like the auction houses and a couple of our colleagues. But you know, it's not the same thing than going through 500 years of culture, not going through all these decisions done within these times. So I think it's going to be a huge change when it comes down to value. When you use the word museum.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. And if I had to make a very small presentation. But if I had had more time, I could have made a longer presentation about why it is that there's so much interest in contemporary art, and it's a lot to do with the way where money comes from today. And money is no longer inherited, it's made. And that means that connoisseurship, knowledge of art history, the people who are buying art don't necessarily have that background, that memory, that archive. And that also is changing everything. And the new economies, as I say, in China, it is going to change our aesthetics. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, ultimately?
But I think what we have to think together, are we happy, the galleries, with these huge prices? In general, we are not, no? When you listen that this piece has reached this huge amount of money, I don't think it's our reality, our everyday life in contact with collectors and with the society.
It is a new reality. Yeah.
Of course, it's the economy that has nothing to do, and we are a mixture. We are markers.
I think
we are believers.
I would like to
in
say
our
something because there are other questions. I think there's an issue in some of the ideas that have been here, is that maybe it would be very helpful if there was a figures of the gallery market. So in ARCO we have tried to do it. We have asked the galleries to give us a figure. They always have been very estimative figures that we used to do because we're good for the press release the last day, but they were not real figures. But I think it would be very helpful in a way for the journalists, for the art markets, and for the galleries itself, if we could, if you could establish somehow your figures about your sales per year, you know, I don't know, in a very transparent or public way, because that will help also to value your artists, to value what the galleries, the work of the galleries are doing for the art market, and that'd be something interesting.
Yes, that's very important. This is earlier today, people were talking about that. I think if the gallerists had a stronger voice. Speaking as a journalist, what catches my attention is a big figure. If I could say ARCO produced 50 million euros of sales, that's a good headline for me. We don't get that at the moment. So I think that the gallery world needs
Absolutely.
to speak with a strong and more united voice in order to get better, in order to fight against the... So I think that's a very good point you've made there.
Okay. I would give the word to Mr. Gaspar, and then I see 1 and 2 hands over there. Maragall, sorry.
My name is Juan Antonio Maragall. I'm the director of 2 art galleries in Barcelona, Trama and Sala París. My question is related to the different approaches that I see on the panel to the figures of the economy in the art market. I see and understand perfectly well the approach of a journalist, a very good journalist, Mrs. Adam, and of a professor that looks at the economy as a global vision. And I see a different position by Mrs. Soledad Lorenzo. She points out that the investment factor in the size of our galleries may be not the premium goal of our clients. That pleasure, passion would be more the primary goal when a client comes into our galleries. In this sense, I see that our approach to figures as gallerists is very, very different from the approach that auction houses make. In the auction houses world, you see big figures. You see a very few big auction houses, they move huge figures. We are quite a number, and you pointed out in the figures you explained us, a huge number of gallerists that each one of us moves slightly or significantly low figures. I would try to put on the table that we shouldn't look at the art market as a global market, because there are 2 extremely different realities. And the reality of the big figures may then overpass our reality, which is a reality quite democratic of a lot of agents dealing with lower figures. And this I would like to introduce to the table as an idea.
Well, I've always said there's not one art market. There's a whole layer, and there are different sections which perform differently.
Well,
and that proves it.
Working
yes.
with artists, not with the works with the works of artists, but
yes.
we work with the artist itself. So it's different because you have to look at really is this market to be supported from the future, because it's very easy to go up, but if you go up, you have to maintain, because if not, it's not serious for a gallery that work with arts. If it's secondary market, you can put any price. But it's a lifetime of the artist what we are working with, no? So it's not
my
the same.
subject is the market, so
No,
that's what
it's
I talk
no,
about.
we are market.
I-
I'm a market.
I
mean,
totally
don't-
understand that.
But it's, the person, the life of the artist is very important as well.
Absolutely.
I think
That he thinks about, we can do it now, but think of the future. What is it going to be? Sometimes young artists that
I think that
we sell everything and say we can't go up. Say, what is? You have a long life in front of you, so it's different.
I think that could also have been an issue for the previous talk about the role of the galleries. It's working with the artists or with the works of art. I think Anne de Mestre is asking for the word, but there was someone over there, a hand in the left, and
Hi, I'm Jose Aloy from Polygrapha, publisher of prints. I just wanted to point out if you don't see a great opportunity with the crisis, in the sense that before the crisis, any gallery or most of the galleries were selling everything, good artists with no advice, bad artists, so the prices were crazy for everything. After this, real collectors stayed, good galleries giving good advice stay, and the real good artists are maintaining, some of them, the prices. So then I see that if we do our job as we should do it, and we have done it for the past, the market today or maybe tomorrow will appreciate that, and our clients will stay with us. No? The second point I wanted to say is that we talked about profitability, no? And the art as something you can sell. But I think there is a dual market between an asset, like in the first talk we had with the mega galleries of Gagosian, Haussel&Wirth, and whoever, that they sell assets. It's art, but it's an asset. With the galleries, I look around and I know most of them, the problem is that the kind of artists they work, even they are really good, most of them, in a crisis, there's no market. I mean, there's no price. It's not about, I will lower the price. It's not like a share. A share has, it's liquid. You can sell it tomorrow at one price. There's one price. But with real estate and with art, you need to find the right person to buy it. And that's not easy with a lot of it. If we talk about art as an asset, which I don't like, but anyway, it is.
I think this idea about the opportunity and only the good artists stay and you only keep the good artists. Before working as director of ARCO, I worked with a gallery, and what you're implying means that the gallery breaks the relation with some of their artists. I think it's a very traumatic process for every gallery. So I think it's the worst decision, and it's very traumatic both for the artists and the gallery. So I think what you're proposing, it's breaks to very difficult decisions to the galleries. You know, like stop working with some artists because they're not fulfilling the expectations, the galleries or the.
Trying to say that in any market, even its shares or whatever, when everything goes well, everything sells, whether it's good or bad. I'm not saying when you have a gallery and you have to say no to these artists. I'm saying galleries as a global thing. I do really think that the gallery is an advisor for a client, not client artist by artist, but as a whole. I think you should follow a gallerist and a person who goes with you as a collector and helps you building a collection. And if he has been fair and you have been intelligent, this will continue. It's not about you. I know what you mean, and
I think there's no personal relationship between stock exchange and stock brokers, while there is a very strong relationship between galleries and artists, fortunately. So I think it's not as easy and as flexible as you're pointing it. But probably the galleries.
We are dealing with the life of the artist.
Absolutely.
I mean, so we must be more careful.
Absolutely.
Because as let's say, advisors or looking in a different position, no? So
I'd agree. I think Anne, or someone had a question over there, no? See, you have a microphone, it's coming.
Thank you. Maybe I didn't get it because I'm not a gallerist.
Maybe that's why you should speak.
My name is Anne de Meester. I'm director of the Appel Art Center. I had a question that I have difficulty phrasing towards both the professor and Mrs. Adam, was that if you look as a non-professional, you look towards the stock exchange, then one of the things that you notice is that sentiment and emotion plays a huge role. I mean, stock exchange rates go up and down, not only related to real financial hard value, but according to emotions and sentiments. I mean, we saw it in the Netherlands, ING Bank drops when something in the newspaper points out a more sentiment-like factor as trust that is decreasing in the bank. And it doesn't really have anything to do with financial value. And I say that as a non-specialist. I think that kind of factor, which is also sentiment, is an economic factor, I think, in stock exchange, plays a gigantic role in the art market. As Mrs. Adam pointed out, auction houses might be a problem, but they create confidence in the market. Is there a way, and that's why I have difficulty phrasing it, and it sounds naive, to calculate that factor? I mean, how do you, as an economist or as an economic journalist, how do you calculate that factor of sentiment and emotion and trust?
You're the expert.
Well, in the stock exchange of Amsterdam, or in London, or New York, many experts, they evaluate minute by minute that sentiment. And there is a word called volatility index, VIX. It's quoted in the Chicago Board of Exchange. When the volatility is around 12, that means a world in peace. No wars or controlled wars, and no fear when Lehman Brothers, the index jumped to 200, for example. In March 2009, it collapsed to 2025, and we saw all the shares going up. When we suffered the debt crisis of Greece, Portugal, Ireland, the index jumped to 85. The gold jumped from $400 up to nowadays $2,000. But the best index is, as I said, the volatility index of the Chicago Board of Exchange.
I used to advise public bank in Spain, called Instituto de Crédito Oficial, in their art program. But one of their goals while I was working with them is that they created this trust index that they publish once a year. And what it was more curious is that if the index was positive, that created even more trust. So it was like sustainable,
self-fulfilling, yes.
Self-fulfilling.
Yeah.
So it's something that they calculate. Don't ask me why, but it was very interesting that those indexes exist.
Yeah.
Probably doesn't exist in the art market, but it's much more sentimental. But probably, museum exhibitions or magazine covers can bring that trust in.
Plain language in Chicago, they say the fear is quoting minute by minute. They call the fear gauge.
the fear.
Thank you. I think there was some question in the back. The lady.
My name's Tasneem Salam, and I run a gallery called originally Tasneem Gallery in Barcelona, though I'm from the UK, though my heritage is South Asian, so I cross quite a few different cultures. I have a number of, I have about 3 things I want to say very quickly. Georgina, you mentioned that Damien Hirst's sort of amazing success just after, in his auction, or just after Lehman Brothers collapsed. But as I understand it, there was a lot of collusion going on in the buying there, and that what he didn't really achieve what was actually reported. So one of the things I think the problem is that we have as just normal galleries is just getting frightened by some of these big figures. And then drawing on really what Mr. Maragall and Soledad Lorenzo said is that, yes, buyers do buy not just for the investment. Some do buy for investment, but also because they love the art. And I think actually we look at the bricks as new areas, but actually I think there's still quite a lot that galleries can do to bring in new buyers in the existing markets that they have. Because there are still people who will pay 50,000 for a car, but would hesitate very much to pay even 5,000 for a real painting. So there's a lot of work that galleries can do right now in making art something that people would like to have in their homes. So there's a market still in Europe, in Spain, and as well as all the markets in the emerging markets. And just lastly, sorry to take up so much time, just that we talked a little bit about aesthetics and how it's changing. And I suppose, I don't know what you think, that with contemporary art, it is a little bit less about aesthetics as we traditionally call it, and perhaps a lot more about ideas. And so the market, again, is quite different.
Yes, thank you. So your first point about Hirst, I totally agree. We've been told that those amazing figures were made. There are all sorts of rumours in the marketplace that enormously long payment terms were granted, that people didn't have to pay for 6 months or a year, or that things weren't paid for. There is no way we can know, because in any other sale, if a vendor wasn't paid, he would, some of them, you know, if a number of vendors, if they weren't paid, it would come out because they would complain or they might even go to court. In the case of Damien Hirst, since it was from his studio, if something wasn't sold, he just takes it back to his studio. So I don't know. That being said, it's never been possible to prove that sale, and at least some of it was genuine, all the same. Probably not quite the glorious figures we were told, but a good part of it was. On the day Lehman Brothers went down, and a lot of that was new money. So, you know, it is there. Your second point is was really not just a question, but I agree with you. Yes, I think there is still a lot to be done in European markets, and that one shouldn't just look at the emerging markets. I think that's a very good point. And your third point about the aesthetics, it's true, but it's inevitable if your market, as Soledad says, your market has shrunk a bit here. You maybe want to see how, you know, you can find, in order to find markets for your artists, in order for your artists to be able to work, you do have to look outside your own borders. And
no, that for sure. I mean,
it's inevitable. It's
the
globalization.
The question that is already for years. I mean, for a long time.
Yes.
But the question is if our system of galleries, as we are now, is going to be the right thing for the future. Because I think my case, I'm too old. I don't need to think about the changes. But really, it's difficult to think of another system, because art, on the other hand, has its love and passion as well. If not, it's very difficult to make the people create collections, because they are really, they believe in what they are doing.
And the best investment
is not the money, because if for the money only, we could sell very, very little, because they believe, the people believe more in the economical system. I buy this stock exchange, and if I sell tomorrow, perhaps it's not that. Art,
but
art
the
is
best
a question of culture, is very deep,
yes,
and the
passion.
attitude of the collectors. Thanks God. I mean, we find all types of people, of course, in the galleries, but what moves the market is the belief on art, because if you don't believe, you don't buy it.
In order to support your point, I will tell you, I went to Santiago de Chile 2 weeks ago to visit Santiago and to promote ARCO, and I went to visit the galleries, and there I saw these beautiful buildings, completely amazing, but that had really an interesting program. And then there was this tiny, tiny gallery in an apartment in a second floor called González and González, who had probably best artists than any other of the good galleries, and that they were really doing, supporting young artists. They were very active. They were not at a fair, but they were really, really active and positive. So I think the galleries, maybe in a smaller format, will still be the way the artists get to the collectors and the public, for sure.
All types of gallery, even the galleries that's in Gagosian, that really is a big market. I mean, that is true, but they have very good artists. I mean, we can doubt about the prices sometimes if they are too high or. But they come from very, very good artists. They don't come from rubbish in general. Perhaps it can be, but it lasts very little. This phenomenon lasts very little. The good ones, and I'm the first of not believing in these huge prices. I think it's a little bit unfair. No, I don't know, but that's market. People pay for it. We are in the
Absolutely.
market. Before some of you were saying that, no? We are in this reality, and if it's like that, if it exists, we have to accept it.
Absolutely. Oh, I think there's a question over there, to the right.
Hi, thanks. My name is Noah Horowitz. I'm the director of the VIP Art Fair, and we'll be speaking on the future of art fairs tomorrow morning. The first thing I wanted to address is this idea of, I have a quick comment and then a question, actually, is this idea that art is the penultimate investment. It's a very controversial topic. And the fact remains that actually art is a pretty bad investment when you cut it across the board amongst the millions and millions of practicing artists that exist. Georgina used the statistic of some 400,000 galleries internationally. If you threw a dot at any one of those galleries and bought a work by any given artist, my guess is that you'd have a very difficult time reselling it at all and reselling it at a premium. So to dispel that myth, I'd say, I just wanted to say that. And part of the reason for the conference, of course, is to bring together a professional group of people who really aspire to something more than that. And that's a very important thing. The question, I suppose, that I had is the question that nobody's addressed in the panel, which is how to deal with the economic crisis and what the panelists think about this topic. As the director of an art fair, and I published a book on this subject as well, I get asked this all the time. And I suppose my guess is as good as anybody else. But in September 2010, as the art market picks up again, U.S. federal debt was downgraded very controversially over the summer. There's a lot of volatility in the art market, to use a professor's term. And a lot of people are asking, where is the market going? What's happening next? And I'd love to hear from all three of you, actually, about what you think of the market over the next, say, 12 to 24 months, whether it can be sustained or whether we'll see a reversion.
Well, I believe that we survive at many, many crises, and we are going to survive this one as well. When I don't think we don't believe the economical world we don't believe in anything in this moment of counting the economy, the banks that were a little bit the thing that we put the money with a certain piece, not saying, well, there is. I remember a few months ago I said, well, don't invest that, leave it in the account. And he said, Soledad, is much worse in the account than in the market, in the, anywhere else. So that had never happened during my 74 years. I mean, the banks were secure, were strong, and where people put the money there with relaxed, and now perhaps we don't know everything, we don't believe in anything. And in this sense, culture and art, that is the only, art is the only thing that in culture is object, let's say. An object is what can become expensive, and it is the reality of art. So it's going to maintain, I think, a market, but people will go on buy it, but not at certain prices, I suppose, or not are going to maintain these prices. That is the history is going to say.
I think we are in a creative industries, and probably the answer to a question be being creative and work harder than ever. I think that's what most of the galleries are doing, and they're trying the best, to do new things. This is a new project to talk about galleries, having new ideas, doing new projects. I think that's the only way to keep the market going, to keep the interest of collectors, to keep the interest in contemporary artists. I think that would be my advice. I think we only have 5 minutes because we have to go and see the exhibition. There was a last question over there.
Sí. Jo parlaré en català, que és l'idioma que m'expresso millor. Soc Carme Espinet, tinc Galeria a Barcelona. L'any que ve farà 39 anys que la tinc. A veure, aquí he trobat molt interessant tot el que s'ha parlat aquesta tarda.
Puedes hablar más alto?
Val. El que passa és que veig que s'ha parlat molt de grans inversions, de grans col·leccionistes, de pintors, d'artistes que venen molt car, i a mi em fa l'efecte que aquí també hi ha unes quantes galeries, perquè amb els anys que fa que estic en aquest camp les conec, i que tenim galeries que treballem amb artistes, que els estem portant i els estem intentant donar a conèixer, molts d'ells joves. El que passa és que ens trobem que amb aquesta crisi que hi ha ara, que suposo que és perquè ha canviat la manera de viure, que nosaltres tenim com els colmados que han desaparegut perquè la gent va anar al Carrefour. I voldria preguntar al doctor Tornabell si creu que el nostre ofici i les nostres galeries, que al fi i al cap fan boniques les ciutats i formen part del paisatge, igual que les llibreries, que si estem condemnats a desaparèixer.
Li contesto en català?
Sí, sí.
Let me try to say it in English. There is an effect called the Firenze in Italy phenomenon. Some people was afraid that in Firenze, Florencia, one can see not hundreds, but dozens of small jewelry, small boutiques, small galleries. And someone said, es el efecto Florencia, it's the effect of Firenze. If you add more boutiques, more galleries, more art centers, you will get more sales, more people coming, and you will compete against the grandes superficies, the hypermarkets and so on. The effect of Firenze has been recognized all around Europe. I don't know in the States, but it is happening in Barcelona. In La Roca del Vallès, it's happening in clothing, in design, and in Madrid, as far as I know, it is happening the same. And thanks to the Rinascimento, Italy was creating art, sculpture, paintings, and so on. And small traders, small boutiques, and it maintains the same model. I believe in Firenze.
Thank you.
That's the critical mass.